Welcome back to Rockford Reading Daily. We are continuing to read Sister Citizen by Melissa V. Harris Perry. We are getting ready to begin the final chapter, chapter 7. But before we do so, we have a sort of a interlude in between chapters, which we've seen occur in multiple other chapters before this. Okay. Quote, praise song for the day, end quote. Elizabeth Alexander. On January 20th, 2009, Barack Obama became the first black president of the United States of America. After taking the oath of office, he gave an inaugural address setting out a sweeping vision of hope and change for a country gripped by 2 foreign wars and spiraling into a deepening domestic economic crisis. When he took his seat, poet Elizabeth Alexander stood. Alexander is an accomplished African-American poet and professor. Her writings and scholarship are deeply rooted in the history of black women in America. This is the poem she delivered on that day. A poem for Barack Obama's presidential inauguration. Each day we go about our business, walking past each other, catching each other's eyes or not, about to speak or speaking. All about us is noise. All about us is noise and bramble, thorn and den, each one of our ancestors on our tongues. Someone is stitching up a hem, darning a hole in a uniform, patching a tire, repairing the things in need of repair. Someone is trying to make music somewhere with a pair of wooden spoons on an oiled drum, with cello, boombox, harmonica, voice. A woman and her son wait for the bus. A farmer considers the changing sky. A teacher says, take out your pencils, begin. We encounter each other in words, spiny or smooth, whispered or declaimed, words to consider, reconsider. We cross dirt roads and highways that mark the will of someone and then others who said, I need to see what's on the other side. I know there's something better down the road. We need to find a place where we are safe. We walk into that which we cannot yet see. Say it plain, that many have died for this day. Sing the names of the dead who brought us here, who laid the train tracks, raised the bridges, picked the cotton and the lettuce, built brick by brick the glittering edifices they would then keep clean and work inside of. Praise song for struggle, praise song for the day, praise song for every hand-lettered sign, the figuring it out at kitchen tables. Some live by love thy neighbor as thyself, others by first do no harm or take no more than you need. What if the mightiest word is love? Love beyond marital, filial, national. Love that casts a widening pool of light. Love with no need to preempt grievance. In today's sharp sparkle, this winter air, anything can be made, any sentence begun. On the brink, on the brim, on the cusp. Praise song for walking forward in that light. Okay. I should say this. I apologize for not reading that as well as I'm sure that this young woman delivered it. So let's begin chapter 7, Michelle. On the night he was elected president of the United States, Barack Obama told a story about an African-American woman named Ann Nixon Cooper. Cooper was 106 years old and lived in Georgia and vigorously supported his candidacy. She had been born in 1902, a time that President-elect Obama described as, quote, just a generation past slavery, a time when there were no cars on the road or planes in the sky, when someone like her couldn't vote for 2 reasons, because she was a woman and because of the color of her skin, end quote. During her life, Cooper was a civil rights advocate, a community leader, a mother, and a wife. As he marked the moment of historic victory, Barack Obama chose Cooper as the lens through which to tell the story of America. He tied her personal story both to the arc of the nation's history and to the future embodied in his own African-American daughters. Quote, America, we have come so far. We have seen so much, but there is so much more to do. So tonight, let us ask ourselves, if our children should live to see the next century, if my daughters should be so lucky to live as long as Ann Nixon Cooper, what change will they see? What progress will we have made? End quote. Ann Cooper is the near namesake of a black feminist foremother, Anna Julia Cooper, who was born in 1858 during slavery and became the fourth African American woman in history to earn a doctoral degree. She died in 1964, the year of the Civil Rights Act. This Anna Cooper also saw tremendous change in her life as her people went from slavery to the brink of full citizenship. She famously wrote in her 1892 treatise. I think that's where it got to be treaty. I gotta get something to drink too. Sorry about that. We starting this chapter kind of rough, but I will say this, and I'm sorry this chord, man. I gotta. I will say this. I do remember this speech. I remember that when Barack Obama was elected. I remember a lot of the narratives that existed around it, and so I think most of the things that we have read about have sort of been outside of my personal experience. And so this is just one thing that I have had personal experience with. And I do remember thinking of that story all the time and thinking of how much, or at the time that I heard it, how I hadn't really considered how many people from what felt like a different world still were, because of how, old they were, still were living and breathing and existing, and the importance of understanding that perspective. I think that's the real definition of having come a long way, but still having so far to go, is an 80-year-old black man in 2020, a 106-year-old black woman in 2008, who has seen how far things have come, but can still see all the shortcomings that still exist. She famously wrote in her 1892 treatise, A Voice from the South, that the full freedom and equality of black women was critical to American democracy. Quote, only the black woman can say when and where I enter, in the quiet, undisputed dignity of my womanhood, without violence and without suing or special patronage, then and there the whole Negro race enters with me. End quote. On November 4th, 2008, it was, of course, a man who became the country's first black president. But through his invocation of Ann Nixon Cooper and, with her, Anna Julia Cooper, he made the experiences of black women central to the historical moment. Their importance was more than rhetorical. African American women voters had provided candidate Obama's margin of victory in many crucial primary wins, and they had helped him carry North Carolina, Virginia, Michigan, Maryland, and other states in the general election. Moments after concluding his speech, Barack Obama was joined on stage by his family, Michelle, Malia, Sasha, and his mother-in-law, Mary Ann Robinson. It is a family of black women. Standing together in Chicago's Grant Park, these women served as a visual reminder that the election of Barack Obama had become a defining moment in black women's struggle for recognition. Michelle's Crooked Room. There is much that one could write about Michelle Obama's role in the election of her husband and as a symbol of his administration. Political observers and authors have already written thousands of words about her and will spill a great deal more ink in the coming years about her role as First Lady. In this brief conclusion, I will not attempt a comprehensive analysis of Michelle Obama as a public figure or rehearse the contributions of other writers. Instead, I want to employ her public persona as a way to summarize the claims I have made throughout this book. I have chosen Michelle Obama because she is the most visible, contemporary example of an African American woman working to stand straight in a crooked room. The success and difficulty she has experienced in gaining accurate recognition is emblematic, if not typical, of black women's citizenship struggles. Michelle Obama was introduced to the American public during her husband's Senate campaign. Barack Obama was invited to deliver a keynote address during the Democratic National Convention that nominated John Kerry in 2004. Keynote address. My fault. His performance that night was extraordinary. The tone and content of his address, I don't know why I'm enunciating these words. Is it enunciating it right or pronouncing? I don't know why I'm pronouncing these words the wrong way like this. The tone and content, not content. The tone and content of his address set forth of his address. Uh, I guess address probably still works. I don't know. I usually would say and pronounce it address when talking about a house and address when talking about uh like a speech. Okay, I'm getting off. I'm getting off track. Okay, let's try this again. His performance that night was extraordinary. The tone and content of his address set forth the rhetorical strategy that would sweep him into a stunning presidential victory just 4 years later. His speech was carefully crafted to build a sense of shared identity with every person listening. He noted his connection to the American immigrant story through his father and his connection to the greatest generation through his grandparents. He could relate to those of African heritage as well as to white Midwesterners. He spoke of himself as a son and as a father. He talked of little league and liberal places and gay identity and conservative places. He rejected the notion of, quote, red states, end quote, versus, quote, blue states, end quote, in favor of a vision of the, quote, United States, end quote, of America. His goal in his speech and throughout his presidential campaign was to encourage listeners from many different backgrounds to find their own story in his personal narrative. This is a, quote, green screen, end quote, political strategy. Like television meteorologists who stand in front of a green screen backdrop so that they can appear on screen in front of a changing array of maps and weather patterns, Barack Obama hoped to place himself in front of a blank space onto which Americans could project their own identities, political goals, and national hopes. In short, he perfected a kind of inverse politics of recognition. Identity politics is typically concerned with securing recognition of the specificity and unique experiences of a group, but this green screen strategy reverses that process. Candidate Obama used the compelling elements of his personal biography to encourage Americans to recognize themselves in him. It was a subtle but powerful shift in the use of recognition, and it was a strategy available to him because his biography is so encompassing. Given the vast racial gap in American public opinion, it is exceptional that he could so effectively cultivate this sense of shared identity with Americans from many different backgrounds. It is unlikely that any Black American could have been elected president without this ability to elicit a sense of shared identity. The green screen strategy was a crucial aspect of his electability. I'm trying not to say so much. I've been saying that for like a year. Or I've been saying I'm trying not to say for like a year. Obviously, I've been starting sentences with much longer than that. It's a bad habit. But I've never seen anybody speak about, and again, I haven't read an extensive amount about Barack Obama's campaign and Barack Obama's administration. I've read extensive amount about things that have happened in the time periods concerning policing, concerning mass incarceration, but I have not read a lot about the specifics of his campaign and his administration. So hearing about this strategy and hearing the way that it was deployed, again, I was old enough to, remember the address that was given when he was elected, but, too young to remember uh, the methodology that was used in his campaign. However, this, it being framed like this makes sense. And I think that is something that, and this is something that is echoed, I hear a lot about people who thought Barack Obama was going to be a different form of president than he ended up being. But there is some type of uh, usefulness in being able to use this green screen effect, as was put here by Melissa V. Harris Perry. I think it's something that I attempt to use when we speak about police terrorism, mass incarceration, and racial injustice, is to get people to be able to see themselves in the as the person that is suffering from these injustices, and see the times that they have suffered from these injustices, and see other people suffering from these injustices as themselves also suffering from them, or the possibility of themselves also suffering from them. And I found that the best way to do that is to learn about as many different walks of life and experiences in life in this society, in this country, as possible, to be able to uh, amalgamate all those things together into one cohesive ideology that can be articulated and communicated with people. Michelle Obama did not put herself in front of a green screen. Her life, while exceptional, was a far more familiar story for a Black American. She was raised on the south side of Chicago, had opportunities to study at prestigious universities, returned to her hometown, where she worked for government and educational institutions, married, and raised a young family. Unlike Barack, Michelle has two Black parents and a Black sibling, and she comes from a city readily associated with Black life and politics. She has a family tree that traces back to American slavery. While Barack Obama carefully cultivated the political value of his relatively unusual, even exotic biography, Michelle was far more easily classified within America's existing racial framework. In the early months of the campaign, the Chicago Sun-Times wrote, quote, "And although Obama is an adopted Chicagoan, born in Hawaii to a Kenyan economist father and a Kansas-bred cultural anthropologist mother, his wife is pure Chicago," end quote. Just a month before the presidential election, the Washington Post agreed, quote, "While Barack Obama's provenance, his Black Kenyan father, white Kansas-born mother, and Hawaiian childhood, has been celebrated as a uniquely American example of multicultural identity, Michelle Obama's family history, from slavery to Reconstruction to the Great Migration North, connects her to the essence of the African American experience," end quote. Even the international press weighed in the day after the election. The Times of London commented, quote, "Michelle Obama's ancestors suffered slavery, segregation, and humiliation. Her heritage embodies a dark past many would rather forget," end quote. Because Michelle Obama seemed to fit neatly within the American racial framework, she was readily subjected to the distorting images of the crooked room. For example, there were attempts to frame her within a common trope of hypersexuality. In the heat of the general election fight, Fox News referred to her as, quote, "Barack's baby mama," end quote. Baby mama is a derogatory term for the mother of children born outside of marriage. It usually implies that the woman is difficult and bothersome to the children's father. Thus the slang phrase, quote, "baby mama drama," end quote. Many commentators found this reference to Mrs. Obama appalling, denounced Fox News, and elicited an apology. While Fox News has earned a reputation as particularly virulent on issues involving the Obama family, their characterization of Michelle Obama was not motivated by political opposition alone. It was rooted in a specific history of shaming Black women as sexually immoral. In reality, of all the major players in the 2008 presidential campaign, the Obamas had the most traditional, least controversial sexual history. Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama's rival in the primaries, still labors under the shadow of her husband's public infidelity. John McCain's relationship with his second wife caused a scandal in Washington, D.C. after his first marriage abruptly ended. Sarah Palin's teenage daughter was unmarried and pregnant during the campaign. Even Joe Biden, in his second marriage, though the story of his first wife's death was far more tragic than Even Joe Biden is in his second marriage, though the story of his first wife's death was far more tragic than scandalous. Only Michelle and Barack were in a scandal-free, traditional first marriage, raising the biological children born of and in that marriage. Yet it was Michelle who was derided as a, quote, "baby mama," end quote. It is the negative myths surrounding Black women in America that allows some commentators to feel they were licensed to deploy such a wildly inaccurate term. Okay, in reflection in the passages we just read, I think what stands out most significantly is the term baby mama, not necessarily the usage just of it being deployed against Michelle Obama, but the just usage of it in general. And one of the things that happens a lot of times with Black culture is that things that exist within the culture, things that would exist. Let me see. Sometimes there are terminologies or ideologies or words and this is now, I'm not singling out baby mama. I'm just talking about something that can happen, which when deployed by people outside of the community, outside of the black community, and even sometimes internally in the black community, if it's in a malicious way, can have a humongous negative residual effect. And the word nigga obviously is the first thing that you think of that I think of when I think about something that is that in the manner in which it exists in black culture, that there's a argument to be made that it is not something with a negative impact. But then in the manner it exists within society, there's also a strong argument about it being a negative impact, and that whatever positive comes from it is an argument to say that there are negatives that outweigh it. And I'm not necessarily making that argument, but I think the same thing exists for the term baby mama, because there are some people who there are some people who, the reason that this term that she pointed out specifically about it, she talked about it being a derogatory term because of the negative perception of women having children out of wedlock. And that perception is not nearly as, especially right now, 2022, as negative in the black community as it is in communities outside of it. And this is not to me make my claim on whether I agree with or don't agree with marriage, but that's not a character. Becoming pregnant is not a character trait or a character flaw, uh, and it's only used as such for, not only, but it's used as such specifically on black women to try to, as we've read about in here, for a numerous amount of stereotypes that can be perpetuated for it. But also it's used as a way of shaming women in general. It's used as a way to be able to put some type of wrongfulness or some type of way to, some type of form of judgment that, and again, this is something that only a woman can experience, that being pregnant and having a child out of wedlock makes that child less legitimate, which is some type of, foreign, ancient, type of, belief system that comes from, or that you're less valuable or you're less of worth because of not being married and having a child. And so when I say all those things to say that, so like there may be people that you encounter and that I have even encountered, especially growing up in around predominantly black people, where that's a term that's used with love. And again, somebody else might not agree with that. It might not. It's an argument or a discussion to be had within this, but when it's used outside of the community, when it's weaponized, I guess, yes, when that word is weaponized, like it was done with Michelle Obama, then it brings out all the reasons to reflect on the negative connotations that exist within the word, and whose agenda is furthered by those negative connotations. Okay, let's keep reading. Let's continue reading. Other observers comfortably framed Michelle Obama as an angry satire figure. She earned the label, quote, angry black woman, end quote, at several points during the campaign. One key moment occurred when the content of her Princeton University senior thesis was made public. In 1985, a young Michelle Robinson had written a senior research project for the Princeton Sociology Department in which she explored the social and personal difficulties many African American students experienced at the university. The thesis also revealed her own sense of alienation on campus. In the introduction, she wrote, quote, my experiences at Princeton have made me far more aware of my blackness than ever before. I have found that at Princeton, no matter how liberal and open-minded some of my white professors and classmates try to be toward me, I sometimes feel like a visitor on campus, as if I really don't belong. Regardless of the circumstances under which I interact with whites at Princeton, it often seems as if, to them, I will always be black first and a student second, end quote. Her analysis, though unsophisticated, is compelling and steeped in her frustrated effort to gain recognition. It resonates with the struggle we have seen as representative for black women throughout American history. Yet when this paper was made public, many in the media questioned whether Michelle Obama harbored resentment and hatred toward white people, white institutions, and America in general. Few questioned the veracity of her claims. Instead, her complaint alone was enough to label her as angry. Some clearly believed that as a black girl from, quote, inner city in, quote, Chicago, she should have been undeservedly grateful for the opportunity to She should have been unreservedly grateful for the opportunity to study at Princeton, and any discomfort or criticism must necessarily be irrational and angry. The results that have emerged throughout this book suggest that Michelle Robinson was most likely responding to Princeton University as a crooked room where securing recognition was difficult. The angry black woman label was most severely applied after Michelle Obama said, during a campaign stop in Milwaukee, that, quote, "For the first time in my adult life, I am proud of my country because it feels like hope is finally making a comeback," end quote. This comment became fodder for opposition speculation about her latent anger. She was a 44-year-old mother of two who earned a significant salary and held degrees from Princeton and Harvard, yet she was never previously proud of her country. Again, her critique was taken as evidence of her irrational anger. If her criticism of Princeton University was seen as revealing an inappropriately racialized psychology rather than the university's institutionally discriminatory practices, her pride comment was received as evidence of her lack of patriotism rather than as cause for reconsidering the nation's racial history. Every time she pointed out that the angles of the room were crooked, the nation seemed to shout back that she, not the room, was askew. The July 21st, 2008 cover of The New Yorker captured the growing characterization of Michelle Obama as an angry black woman. It depicted Barack and Michelle Obama as fist-bumping terrorists. An American flag burned in the fireplace of the Oval Office, Osama bin Laden's picture hung over the mantle, and Barack was dressed in traditional North African apparel. Michelle was shown in military gear and combat boots with an AK-47 slung across her back and her hair in a large, curly afro. The cover outraged many, but magazine spokespersons repeatedly denied that their depiction was anything other than a satirical jab at those who had inaccurately characterized the couple as a radical threat to American democracy. Whatever the intent, it captured a particular sentiment about Michelle. Although Barack Obama had been photographed in similar attire during a trip to Africa, Michelle has never styled her hair in a large afro, been heavily armed, or worn military gear. The New Yorker's representation of her was not derived from visual evidence but from an ideological perspective about her. As is often the case in the crooked room, anger was an easy default framework for interpreting Michelle. I was in the midst of writing this book during the 2008 campaign. As the hypersexualized and angry characterizations of Michelle emerged, I anticipated that I would conclude by explaining how she had been vilified as a result of the crooked images deployed against black women. Then something unexpected happened. In the months leading up to the election, Michelle Obama's favorability ratings rose steadily. By the time she appeared with Oprah Winfrey on the cover of O magazine in April 2009, she enjoyed 68% approval among whites generally and 78% among American women. A look at national polls beginning in February 2008, when she first made the, quote, pride, end quote, statement, and ending in April 2009 shows that favorable opinions of her increased by 30 percentage points among all groups in just over a year. As this book went to press, she continued to enjoy more robust favorability than her husband. How Michelle affected such dramatic reversal in public opinion is an interesting study in black women's resistance and accommodation of stereotypes. Michelle Obama most forcefully encountered the myths about black women in three areas: conversations about her body, discussions about her role as mother, and speculations about her marriage. Each area maps onto one of the three primary myths about black women. Issues of hypersexuality lurk in the media obsession with Michelle's body. The specter of the angry black woman shadows discussions about her marriage, and national yearnings to depict black women as mammy are embedded in public discourse about her role as mother. In each case, she made a number of choices to deflect, resist, redirect, or accommodate these anxieties about her black womanhood. because her efforts were so public, they provide insight into the efforts of one African American woman to stand straight in a crooked room. They also suggest the limitations of individual strategies to challenge deeply embedded myths. And that brings us to a changing of the theme within this chapter, and that will also bring us to the end of this episode. We will return tomorrow and continue reading chapter 7 entitled Michelle, learning more about Michelle Obama and learning how her experiences with stereotypes, what it says about the masses of Black women and the society that we live, American society that we live in. Okay, please share this on whatever platform you're listening to it on. Be on the lookout for tomorrow's episode of Rockford Reading Daily. If you are listening to this and its future episodes out, please listen and share those as well. Remember, we put these episodes out on a daily basis to provide people the opportunity to begin and further their journey in the struggle to end police terrorism, mass incarceration, and racial injustice. I'll let you tomorrow.